Daniel Rivers had never imagined life could take such a sharp turn so quickly. Just a year ago, he had been sitting in the living room with his wife, making a list of baby names for the child they were expecting. Emily liked classic names, Henry, Theodore, or Liam. Daniel had only one condition. The name had to be strong, like the journey their child would be stepping into. They eventually settled on Liam, short, firm, and with a resilient ring to it. But no one could have predicted that Liam's arrival into the world would begin not with life, but with fear. The delivery room, usually filled with cheers and the cries of newborns, was eerily silent that day. After Emily's final push, there was no cry. Only the startled glances between nurses, the tense movements of doctors, and the constant beeping of machines. Daniel froze. He could no longer hear his wife's voice or see the colors of the room clearly. Everything had blurred into slow, surreal motion. It took several long minutes before Liam finally let out his first cry, weak and broken, as if his tiny body was straining with everything it had to make that one desperate sound announcing, "I'm alive!" Daniel collapsed to his knees, tears streaming down his face. But that brief moment of relief was quickly crushed by the cold, clinical words that followed. Liam had to be transferred immediately to the neonatal intensive care unit. That night, Daniel and Emily were not allowed to hold their child. They only caught a fleeting glimpse, a tiny red face, a twitch of a hand, and then he was gone behind the heavy doors of the NICU. Daniel didn't sleep. He just slumped in a cold plastic chair, waiting for a doctor to appear. Finally, at 3 a.m., a middle-aged man in a white coat came in, eyes weary, voice calm in a way that was almost terrifying. "There's been significant trauma to your son's spine during delivery," he said gently. Daniel heard the words but didn't understand. When the doctor explained spinal cord injury, possible paralysis, and might never walk, it felt like his head was imploding. His body hadn't even fully processed that he was now a father, and already he was being handed a life sentence on behalf of his son. Emily didn't react. She just turned her face to the wall and lay still, no crying, no screaming. That silence was the most frightening thing of all. The weeks that followed were like a fever dream. Daniel went home first, cleaned up the nursery, and took down the old crib he had set up so excitedly. In its place, he installed special needs equipment, orthopedic mattresses, physical therapy tools. Meanwhile, Emily remained in the hospital under psychiatric observation. They didn't have those joyful first moments that most new parents treasure. No family photos, no videos of Liam laughing in his mother's arms. Only silence, tears, and the heavy weight of unanswered questions. Daniel had loved his son from the moment he first saw him, even if only for a second. But what he hadn't prepared for was having to carry the entire family alone. Emily was no longer the woman he once knew. She used to be witty, sharp, and full of life. Now she barely spoke, didn't smile, and rarely left the bed. She wouldn't even hold Liam. The doctor said it was postpartum depression, a severe form that could last years without proper treatment. Daniel did everything. He picked up extra shifts at the factory, even though he was exhausted beyond reason. He took Liam to every therapy session, taught himself recovery exercises to help his son at home. At night, he would sit outside Liam's room just to listen to his breathing. He was terrified of falling asleep and missing something. Terrified that if he didn't hear that soft, rhythmic sound, something awful might have happened without him knowing. People started drifting away. Friends didn't know what to say. Relatives would stop by now and then, offering awkward, rehearsed words. Daniel didn't blame them. How could they possibly understand what it was like to live every day, wondering if your child would ever sit up on his own? Every morning, Daniel made coffee, placed it on the table, and leaned against the doorway to look into Liam's room. His son lay motionless, wide-eyed. His eyes were big and clear, just like his mother's. And like hers, they were growing more and more silent with time. Liam hardly ever cried. He didn't squirm like other babies stuck in one place. He just looked at the ceiling, at the sunlight filtering through the curtains, and sometimes straight at Daniel, as if asking, "Dad, is this what living means?" Daniel didn't have an answer. All he knew was this: if he gave up, everything would fall apart. The only thing that kept him going was the fragile hope that somehow, someday, things would get better. He began reading everything he could, articles, medical journals, and online forums about rehabilitation in children with paralysis. Then one night, he stumbled upon an article discussing the effectiveness of therapy dogs in stimulating both physical and emotional responses in children with disabilities. It wasn't particularly scientific or groundbreaking, but in Daniel's dark world of the past 2 years, it was a small beam of light. And so, he began to nurture a new hope. Not through medicine, not by waiting on miracles, but by turning to a creature that required no words, honest, loyal, and healing in its own quiet way. A dog. That morning, as Daniel pushed open the door after his night shift, the kitchen remained dark and cold, just like every other day. Emily hadn't woken up yet. Liam was still sound asleep, his face peaceful as if the world had never been cruel to him. Daniel placed the grocery bag on the table, brewed a quick cup of coffee, and sat down on the floor, leaning against the refrigerator. Nearly 2 years had passed since Liam's birth, yet their lives seemed frozen in that moment. There had been no significant progress to call a step forward, nor any drastic changes to label as a collapse. Everything just drifted, quietly, sluggishly, and wearily, like a river in winter. But this time, Daniel felt he couldn't wait any longer. If life continued this way, he too would gradually become a shadow like Emily. And Liam, that little boy, deserved so much more. He recalled the article he had read the previous night, a short story about a girl temporarily paralyzed after an accident, who, thanks to a therapy dog, gradually regained her emotions and even proactively resumed physical therapy. The father in the article referred to the dog as the only non-prescription medicine my daughter was willing to accept. That sentence haunted Daniel throughout his shift, and as he sat there, in the stillness of his own kitchen, he knew he had to try. A therapy dog, not medicine, not machines, but a living being, capable of unconditional love. Perhaps Liam needed that more than any therapy session. Daniel said nothing to Emily. Lately, she barely responded to any of his suggestions. They ate at the same table but didn't talk, slept in the same room but were no longer close. She no longer asked, "Are you tired?" or "How's Liam today?" And he no longer hoped to hear those words from her. He quietly went online, searching for local dog rescue centers. Fortunately, there was one about a 30-minute drive from town that was offering adult dogs for adoption, mostly former pets of soldiers, the elderly, or families facing hardships. Daniel needed no further reason. He put on his coat, grabbed his car keys, and left, as if an instinct told him something awaited him at the end of that road. The rescue center was nestled behind a large oak grove, secluded from residential areas, and unusually quiet. The entrance was marked by an old iron gate with a simple wooden sign that read, "Second Chances Shelter." Every creature deserves a second chance. Daniel gave a bittersweet smile. That message wasn't just for the dogs. Inside, the air carried the familiar scent of dry food and dog fur. The sounds were chaotic: barking, paws scratching on concrete, the clinking of chains. Daniel walked along the rows of kennels. The dogs were diverse, from small hunting breeds to large Labradors, all eagerly wagging their tails at the sight of a stranger. But Daniel wasn't looking for an energetic dog. He needed calmness, a steadfast soul, something Liam could lean on. And just as he was about to turn away, his eyes met a dog lying quietly at the end of the row. It was a large German shepherd, with brown and black fur and deep brown eyes that seemed to have lived through many lifetimes. Unlike all the other dogs, he didn't bark or stand up, just looked at Daniel, silently, observantly. His ears stood erect, body still lying down, but he didn't appear distant. On the contrary, Daniel felt as if he was being seen through. He approached. Kneeling before the iron cage, he softly said, "Hey there, buddy." The dog, neither fearful nor overly excited, simply stepped closer to the cage door and gently placed his moist nose against the metal bars. Daniel also raised his hand, touching the cold metal. That strange sensation, no words, no flattering gestures, yet full of connection. A staff member approached, smiling. "You've got a good eye. This one's named Rex. We believe he used to live with a veteran, very disciplined, very attentive, rarely barks but absolutely loyal. Daniel needed no further information. He knew he had found what he was looking for. Rex wasn't just a dog. Rex was the calmness Liam needed amidst this chaotic world. The first friend Liam could look at, touch, and receive a gentle response, not pity or fear. He turned to the staff member and softly said, "I'd like to adopt him. Today." The paperwork took nearly an hour. Once everything was settled, Daniel stepped into the parking lot, holding Rex's leash. The dog walked beside him, neither pulling nor running, but matching his pace, as if they had known each other for a long time. And for the first time in months, Daniel felt a slight lightness in his chest. Hope, fragile perhaps, but this time, not an illusion. He was bringing home not just a dog, but a chance. A chance for his son, a chance for his wife, a chance for his entire family to come alive again, from the simplest thing, the loyalty of a silent creature. When Daniel drove back home, the afternoon sunlight had turned the front yard golden. He stopped in front of the house and glanced in the rearview mirror at Rex, who sat calmly in the back seat. The dog had been silent the entire ride. No barking, no whining, just the occasional glance toward Daniel, as if asking, "Are we there yet?" Daniel exhaled quietly. He wasn't expecting a warm welcome. He knew Emily would object, but deep down, he still held on to a sliver of hope, that maybe, just maybe, when she saw Rex, her heart might soften. He opened the door and stepped into the house with a small birthday cake in his hand, a treat he had picked up on the way back to mark Liam's second birthday. A simple cake with the words "Happy Birthday, Liam," written in white frosting, no balloons, no candles. But Daniel thought the meaning was enough. Emily was standing in the hallway and turned when she heard the door open. Her face was tired, her eyes sunken from sleepless nights and months of depression. The moment she saw Rex, her eyes narrowed sharply, and her voice cut like a blade. "You brought a dog home?" Daniel swallowed hard, keeping his voice calm. "His name is Rex. He's really well behaved, trained. I thought maybe he could help Liam. You don't have to worry. Maria will take care of him in the mornings. You won't have to do anything." Emily stared at him, then at the cake in his hands. Without a word, she snatched the box and silently walked into the kitchen. The wooden door shut behind her with a dry, final thud that echoed straight into Daniel's chest. He sighed, then turned to Rex, still standing silently by his side like a soldier on duty, and gently patted the dog's head. "It's okay, buddy," he whispered. "This is where we start." Daniel walked into Liam's room. The little boy was lying in his crib, clutching a stuffed giraffe, the only toy he seemed attached to. Liam's eyes lit up when he saw his father, then focused on the strange creature trailing behind him. He slowly sat up, leaning against the side of the crib, and leaned forward, trying to get a better look. Gently, Daniel lifted Liam and placed him on a blanket in the middle of the living room. Rex sat down beside them, keeping a respectful distance. He didn't bark or move closer, just observed. He waited patiently, calmly, as if he knew this wasn't the time to push for attention. Liam, on the other hand, stretched out his tiny hand and giggled. That laugh, the first innocent sound to echo in the house after so many silent months, nearly took Daniel's breath away. He dropped to his knees, speechless, and gently ran his fingers through his son's hair. Rex slowly lay down next to Liam. He didn't fidget, didn't startle the boy. Liam laughed again, louder this time. His little hand waved in the air as if trying to catch Rex's tail. The dog gave a gentle wag, just enough to make Liam burst into delighted giggles. In that moment, Daniel knew he had made the right choice. No scientific research, no doctor's advice was needed. Just that look, that laugh, and the silent connection between boy and dog were more than enough. In the days that followed, Rex officially became part of the Rivers family. Though Emily said nothing, she didn't interfere either. She avoided looking at Rex, sometimes seemed uncomfortable, but she didn't stop Daniel from placing a small dog bed right outside Liam's room. Daniel began to notice small but clear changes in his son. Liam seemed more alert in the mornings, more responsive to sounds, especially the soft footsteps of Rex. When the dog entered the room, Liam would reach out as if calling for a friend. And Rex, understanding, would sit beside him, sometimes nuzzling Liam's hand with his nose, sometimes just lying quietly nearby. Maria, their housekeeper, was the first to tell Daniel that Liam had started making more sounds, not just random babbling, but actual syllables with intention. One afternoon, as Daniel stepped through the front door, Maria ran out to greet him, beaming. "He just said doggy. It wasn't perfect, but I'm sure that's what he meant." Daniel couldn't believe his ears. He hurried into the room and found Liam playing on the floor, Rex lying beside him. When the boy saw his father, he raised his hand, pointed at the dog, and shouted excitedly, "Doogie!" Then laughed uncontrollably, as if he'd just performed a magic trick. That night, Daniel sat on the porch, Rex beside him as always. The silver moonlight washed over the rooftop, and all Daniel could do was whisper, "Thank you, Rex. It's only been a few days, but you've given us something we haven't had in 2 years, laughter." From that moment on, Rex was no longer just a dog in Daniel's eyes. He was Liam's first friend, the first sign of renewal, the first light that shone into a house once buried in silence, exhaustion, and invisible grief. Rex didn't need to speak. He only needed to be there, and that alone was healing. Emily was not one to change easily, especially after all she had endured. Daniel knew this and didn't expect that a dog would instantly transform everything. He merely hoped that, deep down, Rex might find a way into the dark corners of her soul, places he had tried to reach but never quite touched. In the initial days of Rex's presence in the house, Emily maintained complete distance. She walked past the dog as if he were a piece of furniture, without a glance or touch. Each morning, Daniel rose early to feed Rex, take him for a walk around the front yard, and prepare everything before heading to work. He didn't want Emily to feel any added burden, no matter how small. Yet Daniel noticed something. Emily never asked him to remove Rex. Unlike the previous time, when his mother gifted a swing set for Liam without consulting her, prompting Emily to return it immediately, this time she remained silent. And in that silence, Daniel sensed that while she hadn't accepted Rex, she hadn't rejected him either. Maria, the housekeeper, looked after Rex during the day. She loved dogs, having owned 3 back in her hometown before moving here for work. Perhaps because of this, the atmosphere in the house became more relaxed. Maria often chatted with Liam and played with Rex, creating an environment filled with laughter that Emily, whether she wanted to or not, couldn't ignore forever. One afternoon, Daniel returned home earlier than usual. A light rain was falling, with droplets sliding down the window panes like silent tears. He entered the living room and was surprised to see Emily standing by the window, holding a cup of tea, quietly watching Rex lying beside Liam. Her face was expressionless, but the usual tension was absent. She was unaware of Daniel's presence behind her. He didn't want to disturb this rare moment, his wife, who had withdrawn into the heavy shell of depression, standing still, silently observing their son laugh, thanks to a dog. That evening during dinner, Emily spoke for the first time in weeks. Her voice was soft, dry, but clear. "Liam seems to like him." Daniel looked up, astonished. He nodded slowly. "Yes, I think Rex understands him. Not in the way adults try to understand, but it's like they belong together." Emily said nothing more, but this time she didn't leave the meal midway, as she often did. She finished her portion, then stood up and poured more water for both of them. Small actions, but to Daniel, they were like the first rays of sunshine after a long storm. The next day, when Maria left early due to a family matter, Daniel worried about who would care for Rex and Liam while he was at work. He was about to request time off when Emily quietly said, "Go ahead. I can take care of them." Daniel was stunned. Before he could respond, she had already turned away, as if her words were nothing special. But he knew it was a significant step forward. Throughout the day, he couldn't focus on work. Images of his wife standing in the living room with Liam and Rex replayed in his mind like a slow-motion film. He imagined her playing with their son, perhaps gently touching Rex's smooth fur, or simply smiling when Liam laughed. When Daniel returned home in the late afternoon, he smelled food, not takeout, but the aroma of hot soup and toasted bread. He entered the kitchen to find Emily carefully ladling soup into bowls. She didn't look at him, only softly said, "Wash your hands. Let's eat while it's hot." Daniel could hardly believe his eyes. He washed his hands, sat at the table, and saw Liam sitting in his high chair, with Rex lying nearby, his head resting on the chair leg as if participating in the family meal. Liam beamed, babbling something that Daniel could only make out as "guh-guh" and "doggy." Emily placed the bowl on the table, looked at their son, and sighed softly. "He's talking more now." Daniel nodded. "Yes, he's changing faster than I expected." Emily sat down, gently stirring her soup. After a moment of silence, she said, "I'm changing too. Slowly, but I know I can't continue as before." He said nothing, just gently held her hand under the table. That moment, simple yet profound, marked what Daniel had long hoped for. Not a swift recovery, not a fairy tale ending. Just a beginning, a first step. Like Liam learning to stand, slowly, shakily, but with determination. And Rex, still as quiet as ever, served as the bridge connecting fractured souls. He didn't need to speak or do anything remarkable. Just being there, loyal, steadfast, and full of compassion, was enough. His presence alone helped mend a family on the brink of falling apart. The first changes didn't arrive like thunder, loud and dramatic, but rather like tiny raindrops, quiet yet persistent. No one in the Rivers household could pinpoint the exact moment things began to shift, but they all felt it. This house was no longer cloaked in silence. Liam, the 2-year-old boy who once lay motionless in his crib, eyes filled with sorrow, now wore a different expression. He smiled more often. At first, just brief, scattered giggles, then eventually full-on bursts of laughter whenever Rex wagged his tail or gently nudged his leg. The familiar baby babble, once so rare, now echoed every time Rex appeared. Daniel began hearing his son say "doggy" each morning upon waking. That sound, though simple, was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard in his life. Rex was unlike any dog Daniel had owned as a child. He didn't demand playtime, didn't crave attention, and never caused a mess. He was just there, a quiet shadow, always maintaining the perfect distance from Liam. Not too close to scare him, but never far enough for the boy to feel alone. One afternoon, while Daniel was reading in the living room, he looked up and saw Liam, his small body straining, trying to roll from his back to his side, something that had never happened before. Rex didn't do anything special. He just lay there, eyes open, watching. But there was something in his steady presence that seemed to fuel Liam's determination to try harder. Daniel shared the moment during Liam's weekly therapy session. The therapist only smiled. "Not everyone believes in the power of therapy animals," she said. "But I do, especially with children who haven't found words yet. Emotion becomes the strongest bridge. And sometimes, a quiet animal understands a child's soul better than any adult ever could." Emily began to notice. She often stood at a distance, by the doorway or down the hall, quietly observing Liam as he played with Rex. At first, she kept her arms crossed and wore a guarded expression, but after a few weeks, after witnessing her son's unrestrained laughter in Rex's embrace, she started sitting down with her 2 little boys. She didn't say much, just being there was enough. And that alone told Daniel her heart was beginning to soften, bit by bit. One late afternoon, Daniel came home to a scene that nearly brought him to tears. Emily sitting on the floor, Rex lying beside her, and Liam curled up in her lap, clutching the rubber toy that Rex often played with. Her eyes shimmered, but there was a real smile on her lips, the first true smile Daniel had seen in nearly 2 years. "I think he's pulling our son out of his shell," Emily whispered as Daniel sat beside her. "No, not just Liam. Me too." Daniel didn't respond. He only gently squeezed her hand. And Rex, as if sensing the sacredness of the moment, gave a single wag of his tail before resting his head on Emily's leg. She looked down and, hesitantly, reached out to touch his back, softly, for the first time. From that day on, Rex became the center of Liam's world. Without Rex, he refused to eat. Without Rex, he wouldn't do physical therapy. Every time the therapist visited their home, Rex would lie close beside Liam, sometimes dropping a small toy near him to coax him into moving. And strangely, Liam began to respond, slowly with effort, but undeniably improving. He learned to sit more steadily, no longer needing a cushion behind him. His arms began supporting his torso, and his neck stopped drooping like before. Every time he scooted an inch across the carpet, Rex would rush over, lick his cheek, then lie down and wait again. They created a wordless game known only to those two small creatures. One day, while folding laundry in the hallway, Maria heard Liam's joyful laughter coming from the living room. When she stepped in, she froze. Liam was lying on his stomach, slapping the wooden floor in excitement, while Rex lay beside him, head tilted as if sharing the laughter. Maria set the pile of towels down, speechless. It was the first time she had seen Liam show such vivid emotion without any adult prompting. When Daniel heard the story from Maria, he only nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to the living room where Rex dozed under the soft glow of the setting sun. "He's not a dog," Daniel said. "He's my son's first teacher." That night, Emily sat by Liam's bed and didn't leave for 45 minutes. She didn't say much, just told him a few simple stories, sometimes pausing to wipe her eyes. Rex lay at the foot of the bed in silence, his head resting on the frame, as if keeping watch over both mother and child. Daniel stood outside the doorway, afraid to enter, not wanting to disturb that sacred moment. And then he understood. Liam's first steps were still far away, but their journey as a family, a journey back to one another, had already begun. Not through shock therapy, not through medication, but through the loyalty of a four-legged creature, one who knew how to be patient, how to love, and most of all, how never to give up. No one told Rex what to do. No one trained him on how to accompany a child paralyzed from the waist down. But somehow Rex always knew. The right moment, the right distance, the right rhythm of each breath. Gradually, in the eyes of the whole Rivers family, Rex was no longer just the new dog. He became an essential member, a silent coach in the truest sense of the word. Every morning as the sun peeked through the living room window, Rex was already there by Liam's side. No need to be called. No command required. He would lie quietly at the bedroom door, ears perked, tail gently wagging. When Daniel opened the door, Rex would walk in calmly, like a nurse reporting for duty. He never startled Liam, never got overly excited, just lay down beside him, waiting for the boy to wake up. Liam had grown so used to Rex's presence that on the rare mornings the dog wasn't there, he would burst into tears. Daniel once tried to take Rex to a morning vet appointment and had to call Emily home early to comfort their son through the whole ordeal. "He doesn't want anyone else," Emily sighed. "He just needs Rex." Miraculously, under Rex's quiet guidance, Liam began developing movement habits. Rex had a trick that no one had taught him. He would use his nose to nudge Liam's toy just out of reach, then lie down and observe. Each time, Liam would try to crawl forward with both arms, straining his torso to reach the toy he loved. When he finally touched it, Rex would wag his tail as if to say, "Good job, little buddy." Daniel captured many of these moments on his handheld camera. Every time he played them back, he was stunned. How could a dog instinctively know how to motivate at just the right moment? Doctors needed specialized tools, scheduled sessions, and encouraging words. Rex only needed a look, and Liam responded with all the enthusiasm he could muster. One day when Liam managed to push himself into a sitting position from lying down, without help, without pillows, Daniel broke down in tears. Rex sat beside the boy and licked his cheek, as if to offer encouragement. Emily turned to Daniel, eyes misty. "Do you think he knows Liam is recovering?" Daniel didn't answer. He just gently squeezed her hand. That question echoed in his mind. Did Rex really know? Or was it just instinct? But then he realized there didn't need to be a rational explanation. Some things go beyond logic, beyond science, and Rex was the embodiment of that mystery. Rex didn't just help Liam move. He helped heal the whole family. On quiet afternoons, the three of them, Daniel, Emily, and Liam, would sit in the backyard, where a small patch of grass and a wooden swing waited. Emily, who had once refused the swing, now gently pushed it, Liam resting in her lap, while Rex lay at their feet, his head on the warm deck. Day by day, the heaviness lifted. The awkward silences faded. Every laugh from Liam felt like a song of life returning. and every small victory he achieved had Rex's steady presence close by. One Saturday morning, Daniel was preparing breakfast when he heard Emily call from the living room, not panicked, but with a tone that carried urgency and wonder. "Daniel, come here, quick!" He rushed in and froze. Liam was lying face down on the carpet, his hands flat on the floor, stomach lifted as if trying to push himself forward. And Rex, as always, was sitting just ahead, within Liam's reach. In front of him sat a small red rubber ball, Liam's favorite toy, which Daniel knew for a fact had been tucked away in the toy basket. Rex had taken it out, placed it just right, and waited. Liam didn't cry, didn't whine. He clenched his teeth, his face reddening, arms tensing, and pushed. 1, 2, 3 little shuffles. He inched forward. Daniel and Emily held their breath. Rex didn't move. He stayed still, tail swaying, eyes locked on Liam. At last, Liam touched the ball. He let out a gleeful scream. Rex leapt forward, licking the boy's face wildly, part joy, part reward. Daniel looked at Emily. She had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming. I never thought I'd see this," she whispered, "and definitely not because of a dog." Daniel laughed through his tears. "Not a dog," he said. "Our son's coach." From that moment on, they believed Liam would go further. Not in a week, not even a month, but in his own time. And by his side through it all would be a friend who spoke no words, yet understood everything. Rex became the template for every therapy session. The doctor began asking Daniel about Rex's behaviors to tailor Liam's exercises to what he naturally responded to at home. Maria joked, "We should give Rex an honorary diploma." And truly, if there were a title for loyalty, patience, and deep empathy, Rex deserved the highest honors. He wasn't just Liam's first friend, not just the emotional bridge between his parents. He was the one who taught Liam his first life lessons about perseverance, about effort, and about unconditional love. No words needed, just presence. If someone were to ask Daniel what the most significant change was after Rex's arrival, he wouldn't say it was Liam learning to roll over or starting to articulate words more clearly. The most profound and miraculous change in his view was that Emily began to truly live again. Not merely existing, breathing and eating, but actually living, feeling, acting, being fully present in the moment. She was no longer a quiet shadow drifting down the hallway each morning, or the woman who stared blankly out the window. Emily was becoming present again, in her son's eyes and family meals, and in the subtle movements of her hand when she stroked Rex's fur. At first, the changes were barely noticeable. A faint smile when Liam shouted, "Doggy," for the 10th time in a day. The simple act of bringing toys for her son without being asked. Pouring Daniel a glass of water before he could reach for it himself. These small moments, strung together, slowly wove a new version of Emily, still the same woman, but now gentler, more fragile in a beautiful way, and quietly stronger. One morning, Daniel woke up earlier than usual. He heard soft murmuring from the living room, mixed with gentle clapping and Liam's laughter. He stepped out, heart pounding. Emily was sitting on the carpet, Liam lying across her lap, and Rex resting beside them, with his head on her leg like a well-behaved child. Emily was smiling, not a forced, polite smile, but one that came from deep inside. She was telling Liam a simple story about a brave dog who got lost in the forest and found his way home, guided by friendship. Daniel stood still, not wanting to disturb them. He leaned on the doorframe, took a deep breath, and gave silent thanks, not to heaven, not to the doctors, but to Rex. It was this dog, somehow, who had led Emily out of the darkness. Without anyone asking her to, Emily began attending Liam's therapy sessions. At first, she simply watched. Then she started asking questions, taking notes on important exercises, and helping Daniel rearrange their daily schedule to support Liam's development. One day after the therapist had left, she said, "What do you think about trying a mini staircase for him? I read it might help strengthen his hips." Daniel was taken aback. "You read that?" "Where?" Emily smiled. "On a parenting forum. There's a group for parents whose kids have lower body paralysis. I just wanted to learn more." It was the first time in nearly 2 years she had actively looked for information. Until then, everything related to Liam's condition had been Daniel's burden. Emily had merely accepted things quietly, but now she wanted to fight alongside him. Her transformation even reached the way she treated Daniel. No more quiet sighs when he forgot to take out the trash. No more distant stares when he brought up plans for the future. She started placing her hand over his at dinner, asking him how work was going. And when he complained of being tired, she'd smile and say, "I'll get you some orange juice. You need your vitamins." Such a simple sentence, but it left Daniel speechless. He almost didn't recognize the woman standing in the kitchen, hair tied back, holding a glass of juice. That was the Emily from before, the one who used to hum along to the radio while cooking, who laughed until her stomach hurt over the tiniest things, who believed that nothing was impossible if they faced it together. Then one day, while the three of them were playing in the backyard, Emily tilted her head and asked, "Do you believe our son will walk?" Daniel glanced at Rex, stretched out on the grass, then at Liam slowly crawling toward him with a toy in hand. "I used to only hope," he said. "Now, I believe." Emily didn't reply. She just nodded softly. Then for the first time, she wrapped her arms around Daniel and rested her head on his shoulder. That month, the Rivers family did something they hadn't done since Liam was born. They took a family photo. Not a studio shoot, just a simple photo on a phone. Daniel sitting in the middle, Liam on his lap, Emily beside him, and Rex lying at the front, looking straight at the camera, as if he knew he was part of that moment too. When Daniel showed the picture to Liam's therapist, she smiled and said, "Physical recovery is a long journey, but emotional healing, that's the real treasure, and I think you're on the right path." Daniel didn't respond. He knew she was right, because ever since Rex entered their lives, it wasn't just Liam who changed. Emily, once trapped in grief and guilt, had found her way back to life. Not through therapy, not through medication, but through a four-legged creature who knew when to be silent, when to stay close, and how to reach into the deepest corners of a human soul with nothing but an open, wordless heart. They didn't expect it to happen on an ordinary day. In fact, Daniel didn't expect it to happen anytime soon. He still believed his son's journey would be long, maybe years, maybe a lifetime, and he was ready to walk it with him. But it was precisely when he stopped counting milestones, stopped waiting for a miracle every day, that the miracle came, quietly, unexpectedly, and sacredly, like a gift reserved for those patient enough to wait. It was a quiet Saturday morning. The sky was a pale gray, like a veil of mist covering the rooftops. Daniel sat on the front porch with a cup of coffee, a book unopened on his lap. No doctor's appointments, no plans. Just one of those rare days where a person allows themselves to simply be, to breathe, to feel the life in simple things. Inside the house, Liam's laughter mixed with the soft patter of Rex's paws. It was their usual game, toss and chase, and the two best friends never seemed to tire of it. Emily was in the kitchen making tea, her hair tied up high, no makeup on, but looking more radiant than on any holiday. Daniel smiled to himself. This, he thought, is life. Then Rex's bark shattered the peaceful moment. Not the playful bark or teasing woof. It was something else, short, sharp, urgent, like a warning, like a call. Daniel immediately set his coffee down and stood. His heart pounded as worst-case scenarios rushed through his mind. "What's going on?" he called out, hurrying inside. No one answered. Then the bark came again, faster now, followed by a series of familiar clattering sounds. Daniel ran toward the living room and stopped dead in his tracks. Liam was standing, not leaning on the couch, not propped up against the wall, not being held. The 2-year-old boy, once given the heartbreaking prognosis of almost no chance of walking, was now standing on his own in the middle of the living room floor. His arms stretched out like a tightrope walker, his eyes wide, his whole body trembling as if waging war against gravity itself. And Rex, standing right beside him, head lowered slightly, eyes locked on Liam, like a silent guardian, the last line between a child and his limits. Daniel was frozen. He didn't dare move, afraid that even a breath might break the moment. His heart clenched, his vision blurred. Liam shifted, just a little. His tiny knees wobbled, his eyes darted to Rex, then to his father, who stood stunned at the end of the hallway. "Daddy sad?" he asked, his voice still halting. Daniel dropped to his knees. "No, buddy," he laughed through tears. "Daddy's not sad. Daddy's happy. So happy." Rex gave a soft bark, not urgent this time, but almost proud, as if to say, he did it. Liam beamed, and then he stepped, a tiny, shaky step. His body tilted to the left, his arms flailed to balance, and his head pitched forward. But he moved. On those fragile legs, on the wooden floor that had once defined the edge of his entire world. Another step, and then he fell. But he fell laughing, fell without fear. Daniel rushed forward, scooping his son into his arms, bearing his face into the warm, milk-scented hair. Emily rushed in, still holding her cup of tea, then let it fall. It shattered at her feet, but she didn't even notice. She dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around her husband and son, tears pouring like a summer rainstorm. "He stood," she whispered. "I saw him. Liam just stood." Daniel couldn't speak. He only nodded, one hand gripping his wife's, the other clutching Liam so tightly he feared letting go would shatter the fragile miracle they were living. Rex sat beside them, tail gently thumping the floor, as if he had known all along, as if he had been waiting for this very moment for months to prove that every effort mattered, that unconditional love, even when it comes in the shape of a dog, has the power to make miracles real. That night, they didn't need cake or candles to celebrate. No audience, no video, just 3 people and 1 dog, sitting on the carpet, sharing pizza, listening to Liam tell stories in his jumble of baby words. Rex rested his head on Emily's leg, breathing slow and steady, as if his mission had been fulfilled. Daniel ran his hand along Rex's back and whispered, "Did you see that?" My son stood. "You did it, old friend. You did it." And under the warm living room light, once a space of sleepless nights and silent tears, echoed the sound of laughter, from a boy who had just touched the impossible, from 2 parents who had rediscovered hope, and from a dog who knew how to wait, how to love, and how to lead a family home from the darkest places. The next morning, as sunlight slipped through the curtains, the house felt different. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew. Everything had changed. Daniel woke earlier than usual. When he entered the living room, he saw Liam sitting on the rug, his eyes following Rex's slow steps across the floor. The boy pointed at the dog, then looked back at his father, eyes sparkling with excitement. "You want to try again?" Daniel asked, half joking, half in awe. Liam didn't answer with words. Instead, he pushed himself up with both hands, twisting his little body toward the small chair by the wall. With visible effort, he reached for the edge of the seat and pulled himself upright, his legs trembling like leaves in the wind. Rex was already beside him, never leaving his side. As Liam stood tall, Rex aligned himself next to the boy like a living railing. Liam reached out and placed his hand on Rex's back, right where it always gave him the most stability. And then, the steps began. Liam walked, slowly, as if every inch of movement required everything he had. He wobbled, swayed, clung tightly to Rex's fur, but still he moved. 1 step, then 2, then 3. Not far, just a few feet. But for Liam, it was an entire new world. Daniel stood frozen, afraid that blinking might break the spell. Emily came running from the kitchen after hearing his call, just in time to see Liam reach out and touch her hand before collapsing into her arms with a joyful laugh. No one cried this time. They had cried enough. Now was the time to live. And Rex, ever the loyal companion, lay down beside them, eyes half closed, as if he could finally breathe easy. Liam had walked. And from that day forward, the whole family began walking out of the darkness, slowly but with certainty. Liam still had a long road ahead. There would be falls, tears, and difficult days in therapy. But one thing was certain, he would never walk that path alone. Rex would be there, his silent teacher, his unwavering bridge between pain and possibility. Without saying a word, this dog had shown a family that miracles don't always arrive in flashes of light, but grow slowly out of persistence, unconditional love, and the courage to keep showing up. Since the day Rex entered that little home, it wasn't just Liam who changed. Emily found herself again. Daniel rediscovered his smile, and the house that had once echoed with silence was now filled with laughter, tiny footsteps, and the gentle bark of a dog each morning. This wasn't just the story of a dog, it was the story of a family healed. Thank you for watching Animal Tales Daily. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like, leave a comment, and share the video with someone who could use a little hope. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep following the beautiful journeys between humans and their four-legged friends. See you in the next story.